All languages have their own ways of linking ideas together.
English usually works with the subject, followed by a verb, followed by an object.
In BSL, the order of the information is different. Here's Clive with an example of one of the most common ways we make a sentence in BSL.
That means that red car is mine. But the order of the signing is car, that one, red, mine.
First, the signer shows the topic of the sentence, that red car, and then gives other information about it, is mine, and we call this the comment. Try it with Clive. Here's another example. This one's a bit longer.
That means my father built that big house over there. But the signing order is house there big, my father been built. House, there, big, my father been built.
The way BSL uses this topic comment order is just one of the ways in which it differs from English. And because BSL sentences are not the same as English sentences, it means that you can't speak in English and sign BSL at the same time. Let's look at another difference. It's called simultaneity.
In spoken languages, one word must follow another.
But because BSL is a visual language, it can give more than one piece of information at the same time. Here's Rachel Bell with an example. In that example, Rachel starts with the topic of the sentence, the ship, but in the sign that follows, she shows the position of the ship and the wave, the direction they were travelling, and the movement of the wave. And by puffing out her cheeks and narrowing her eyes, she shows the size of the wave. That English version of Rachel's signing is in fact a poor translation of the BSL. A more accurate translation would be something like this.
A huge wave, at least 5 times the size of the ship, loomed up on the starboard side, crashed down, rolled the ship over and drove it below the waves.
One mistake that beginners often make is to think that there's an English word for every BSL sign and vice versa. Well, that's not true, as Rachel showed when she was describing that wave. With one sign, you may be putting across a whole idea. Try not to associate signs with specific English words. Try to think in BSL. Here's another example. That's a sign I'd use when I'm talking about a person approaching me. But it could have several different English translations, depending on the context. For example, it might mean, she came up to me. But there are no individual signs in that sentence which match the English words. The sign gives the whole idea. Here are 2 more examples.
That means something like, several people came up to me and put me under a lot of pressure.
And now our last example. Remember, when you sign, it's the meaning of a complete idea that's signed.
That means I was shocked when everyone turned round to stare at me.
So, the whole idea is given by a single sign. The part of the sign on Clive's hands tells us that everyone turned round to stare at him, and the expression on his face tells us that he was shocked. Now here's an important point. When you're a beginner, it's tempting to look at the hands to see the signs, because the hands and arms attract attention. But as we've seen, a great deal of information comes from a signer's face.
This is quite an important point. If you try to follow the signs on the hands, you won't get the full message. So it's best to train yourself to concentrate on the signer's face. Don't worry about missing signs. You'll find that you'll still be able to see them, even though you're not looking directly at them.
Now it's time for us to start showing you a bit of conversation using BSL. But before we do, perhaps we ought to say something about the signs we'll be using. BSL has dialects, like English, so signs vary from one place to another. In our examples, we're using signs which are generally acceptable. In some cases, these are not the signs we normally use ourselves. If you decide to join a class, and we very much hope you will, you'll learn your local dialect. Don't worry if some of the signs you learn there are different from signs in these programs.
Enough of that. No voices, no talking. All talking must finish now. Am I deaf? I'm deaf. Are you deaf? Are you deaf? And you? And you? Well done. She's hearing. Hearing. Are you deaf? And you? And you? Well done. You're all hearing, all hearing.
Now, let's see what's likely to happen when you meet someone who's deaf and you want to sign to him or her. Well, one of the first things that you might be asked is, are you deaf? And you would reply,
No, I'm hearing.
the next question will almost certainly be, where are you from? Your answer will depend on where you live. Many towns and cities in Britain have BSL signs that mean the name of that town or city. Clive lived for a long time in Glasgow.
Glasgow.
I was born in Bristol.
Bristol.
But now I live in London.
London.
And John lives near Birmingham.
Birmingham.
So, let's see a full conversation of the kind that you might have when you meet someone for the first time.
Excuse me, could you pass the milk, please?
What?
Could you pass the milk, please? Thank you.
Are you deaf?
No, I'm hearing.
You sign really well.
Well, I grew up with sign language. Both of my parents are deaf.
Where do they come from?
Well, they live in St. Helens. Do you know it?
What's their name?
Lee.
I don't know them. What's your name?
My name is John. My wife's name is Carol. What's your name?
I'm Clive.
Ah, Clive. Where are you from?
Well, I grew up in Glasgow. But I moved, and now I live in London. Do you have children?
Yes, 2 boys.
How old are they?
Well, Ben is 7 and Timmy is 5. Are you married?
No, not yet.
Now let's see two different ways of describing the same situation.
I was facing the chairman, the secretary was sitting to my right, and the treasurer was on my left.
And now here's the second one.
I was facing the chairman, the secretary was sitting to my right, and the treasurer was on my left.